I've got a great job and it's up on the slide here. I'm Madeline Richardson. I'm the Executive Director of Skills and Workforce Capability within the Department for Industry and Skills. The first thing I'd like to do is to acknowledge that we meet today on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. I'd also like to acknowledge really importantly that today is International Women's Day. Yay, exactly. And the theme for this year is Balance for Better, which is all about collective action and shared responsibility that drives balance and encourages a stronger working environment. Something that we're really passionate about within the Department for Industry and Skills as well, and that we need to really champion. Also, I'd like to acknowledge that we're joined today by the Honourable David Pisoni, the Minister for Industry and Skills. And welcome to you guys, welcome to all our VET providers, both in person and live streaming here today, to our very first forum, which is really exciting. Just to touch really briefly on our mission within the Department for Industry and Skills, it's threefold. It's about driving economic growth, so how we best create that environment and really build on our strengths. It's about skilling South Australians to succeed. We want to make sure more South Australians have the right skills to secure a job today and build careers in the industries of the future. It's also about how we create and pursue a culture of innovation, creativity and entrepreneurship, supporting more businesses to take a chance and to grow and to thrive. You're going to hear lots about skilling South Australia today, but the one thing I really want to emphasise is how important it is as a catalyst for change. That's about examining the best way that we can collaborate with everybody in this room and beyond, with students, with providers, really to support that lasting change. And what enables that and what sits underneath that is how we have a really responsive training system and ensure that that's driven and informed by industry voice. And so as part of that commitment, this is why we're here. This is why our first forum is today and what we're kicking off a really strong framework and commitment going forward. What we're going to really value today and what we need is about your ideas, your feedback, your input about how we collaborate, how we share information, what's most important to you. We are here to listen and to be as responsive as possible to that. We're going to provide you with some backdrop to that, a little bit of an overview of the state's economic landscape and share a little bit about our priorities and areas of focus within the department as well. Also, I'd like to acknowledge and introduce you our MC today, Marina. Say hi, Marina. For those of you that don't know, I'm sure you do. Marina's our Principal Training Products Consultant, who's incredibly passionate about the sector. That comes across every time we have a conversation and has really led lots of the development of why we're here today as well. She's going to be at the forefront of this program going forward. And I'll welcome Marina to the stage shortly as well, who'll provide some opening remarks. It's my privilege now to welcome the Honourable David Pisoni, the Minister for Industry and Skills, and I look forward to talking to you later today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madeline, and it is terrific to be here. It's an exciting day today. Matter of fact, every day is exciting in the Marshall-level government, I have to say. We like to get things done. First of all, I acknowledge that the land that we meet on today is traditional lands of the Kaurna people and that we respect the spiritual relationship with their country. And of course, it is a big day, International Women's Day. It's been a terrific focus in the media, both on the radio, the television, social media. It's been great to see it celebrated to the extent that it has been. And so much so that Michelle Lensick and I, our Minister for Women, amongst other things, visited CMI Toyota just before this event, and we met a new apprentice, Shelley Thrussell, as a motor mechanic, and it was terrific to hear her story as to why she decided to move into an area that was predominantly, or traditionally I should say, dominated by men. But that is changing. 10% of the apprentices are women at CMI Toyota now, so a great story. So thank you so much for attending the first Training Provider Forum hosted by the Department of Industry and Skills. Registered training organisations, group training, vocational education, training providers and other training institutions have a key role to play in the Marshall Government's work in rebuilding the training system here in South Australia. Your expertise is critical to train a skilled workforce necessary to grow the South Australian economy. For several years, apprentice and trainee numbers have been in decline here in South Australia. Matter of fact, right across Australia, but the worst decline has been here in South Australia. And this leaves industries vulnerable to significant skills shortages, and we're seeing that popping up right throughout various industries in South Australia. We are transforming our training system to meet the evolving needs of South Australia's economy as new industries emerge and grow, such as space. You all heard about South Australia becoming the state now that will host the National Space Centre. There are actually 800 people already working in space in South Australia. It's a fact that a lot of people aren't aware of, which is probably one of the reasons why we're in the box seat with the federal government in hosting the National Space Centre. Defence, of course, will be another big area of skills opportunity, and cyber security. And about 3,600 people trained in cyber security will be needed in the South Australian economy within the next 2 or 3 years if we're to keep up with the changes that are happening in that space. In September last year, the Premier, Stephen Marshall, and I announced Skilling South Australia, a $203 million investment, $100 million from the state government, $103 million from the federal government, extra money to deliver an extra 20,000 new trainees and apprentices over the next 4 years here in South Australia. So it's about $1 million a week extra into skills funding that wasn't there previously. And the department's been working delivering bespoke type packages for industry and even down in individual businesses. Gone are the days where it's a one-size-fits-all. We're working with industries and businesses right across South Australia to design packages using that gross figure of $10,000 per apprentice and trainee to deliver the outcomes, remove barriers for those businesses and deliver the outcomes and support they need to get back into the market for training. We were the first to sign the national agreement with Canberra, and of course a key element of the Skilling South Australia program is additional support for training organisations. We've approved $1 million for our building capacity project, developing vocational education and training teachers, trainers, leaders and support staff employed in registered training organisations. So this is where we're here to see what we can do. I mean, it always scares me when the government says we're from the government, we're here to help, but we are. And you'll be happy to know that all the help is driven by industry. We've been out there to industry wanting to know what it is that we can do, how we can spend your money to deliver much better outcomes in the training sector. So the Department for Industry and Skills has developed a framework of professional development for 2019, which will include ongoing professional development events for the sector, including information sessions and interactive workshops. Regular training provider forums, such as today's, will be held throughout the year, allowing providers to network with professional groups and industry and to share knowledge and professional practice. And I think this is important. I mean, we need to lift the status of vocational education here in South Australia. It is a profession, it is an education process, and we need to acknowledge that. And of course, what we're introducing today is a professional approach for those of you who are in the business of delivering that vocational education. And of course, these forums will work to ensure a coordinated training effort with our state, throughout the state. Other initiatives that were included under Skilling South Australia include additional funding for group training organisations, the doubling of subsidised apprenticeship and training courses through the subsidised training list. More than 700 different careers or different training courses are now subsidised through the subsidised training list. And of course, 90% of that subsidy is now available to the non-government sector, up from less than 30% when we came to office. So we've moved very quickly on identifying the fact that we have enormous gaps in training delivery here in South Australia. We identified that the private sector does have capacity, and so we're funding the private sector, the non-government sector, to participate by opening up subsidised training to the non-government sector. And of course, we're offering support for first-time employers. There's an enormous number of employers out there that haven't employed apprentices or trainees, and we want them to get on board, join the program, and we do understand that there are some barriers that we can help them move, if you like, so they can participate in the apprenticeship program. And we're reducing red tape. We've streamlined the registration process already within the existing legislation, down from some people are saying up to a couple of months, down to about 12 days on average now, and we'll do even better than that once we're able to get changes through the Parliament. A statewide advisory service and tailored project funding, as I spoke about earlier. We're taking advantage of the fact that we're a small state, and so the government can be very close to stakeholders, and that's what we're doing. We're getting up close and personal, and we're getting to understand your business and responding to the requirements that you have. And of course, new flexible apprenticeships through the education system will start from next year. And this is very exciting because we'll be identifying students in about year 10 if they want to move into the workforce through a vocational pathway. The program will be designed to help them do that. They'll start year 12 with about 6 weeks in the classroom and never return back to school again. And they will then start their apprenticeships full time, getting paid while they're learning, and the certificate courses that they'll be learning as part of the off-the-job training will qualify as SACE qualification, and so they will finish their apprenticeship and also have their SACE. And this is very exciting, of course, because we know that some of these apprentices may go on to university. We know that an apprenticeship is a great start for so many different careers, and we're making sure that we're tooling those students up to continue their careers. We've increased the travel and accommodation allowances for regional and remote students, taking the nightly accommodation allowance from $24. You might get a bed in the backpackers for $24, up to $60 a night. We all know that the reality is that the employer tends to pick that bill up. So this will encourage more employers in regional South Australia, where we're unable to provide off-the-job training in regional South Australia, a fair subsidy for that apprentice to come to Adelaide to do their off-the-job training. Learner support services to help apprentices and trainees stay on track and complete their qualification. We're ensuring government investment in training is aligned with industry needs, leading to real jobs and rewarding careers. We have established 8 new industry skills councils, and we're revitalising the Training and Skills Commission, giving industry not just a stronger voice in South Australia's training system, but also skin in the game. You know, we want ownership of what we're delivering in vocational education by industry, because we know that we'll get the best outcomes. If you're taking an apprentice on, you're obviously paying a salary, and if you're making that commitment, we will fund the off-the-job training. There's no caps, there are no rules, there's no bureaucratic paperwork to go through. You've identified your commitment as an employer in taking an apprentice on, and we'll back you by making sure that the off-the-job training is funded. Since being elected in March last year, we've created 4 new paid traineeships here in South Australia. And this is important because many of these were only available for people to learn in their own time or through a bachelor degree. Applied technologies, and you'll end up with a diploma in applied technologies through an apprenticeship system, and we're doing this with an industry group to deliver that. Cyber security, again, very much in demand, and this is in direct response to industry saying to us, we want a vocational pathway into the digital space, and cyber security was the obvious choice in where to start that. Steel frame installer, doesn't sound very sexy, but it's very, very important for the building industry. And a Certificate 3 in individual support. This is health and aged care, and this is revolutionary, if I don't say so myself, because it is the first time ever that you can actually do a paid traineeship while you're getting a Cert 3 in aged care and disability care. Previously, it's done online, and then you're left with people with disabilities, people who need your support in aged care, to work with them on your own. There's a correlation here, isn't there, with some of the issues that we hear in the aged care and disability care sector. So having that on-the-job training, being mentored while you're earning a trainee salary, then you're qualified with a combination of on-the-job and off-the-job training, will get a much better result. And of course, it'll make it much easier for those that are returning to the workforce after a period of full-time caregiving or moving into another industry. It gives them an opportunity to do that without having to cover the cost of their training. And we need that because there's massive shortages in both those areas, in aged care and in disability care. And this is stark contrast, those 4 new apprenticeships and traineeships, a stark contrast to what we saw under the previous government in 2017. No new apprenticeships or traineeships were developed. And as a matter of fact, that year we saw a cut, according to the ROGS report, of $11.8 billion in state funding to vocational education here in South Australia. We need to attract more young South Australians into the skilled training sector, and we need to do that now to secure the state's economic future. Encouraging people to pursue a career through a technical qualification as their preferred option requires a cultural mind shift, and we're doing that through a campaign that we're running on social media and through other media. We need parents to understand the advantages that there are for their children taking on a trade or a vocational pathway, and of course we need those educators that are influencing children to also understand that. And we're seeing optimistic signs from the economy at the moment, with recent reports showing that business confidence in South Australia at its highest level in a decade, and more businesses are employing new staff from full-time staff. And that's one of the magic numbers that came out of the ABS figures released just a couple of weeks ago. 10,000 additional South Australians working full-time now compared to 12 months earlier. So this is a significant indicator of confidence in South Australia. We all know that when you're not sure about the future, you hire casual staff and part-time staff. When you're planning for the future, you need full-time staff, and that's what we've seen happen over the last 12 months. We've seen a conversion of part-time jobs to full-time jobs. That is a very strong economic indicator of the confidence that there is in the business sector here in South Australia. So it's time to ramp up the process. It's time to make sure that people are getting on board with skills training here in South Australia. So I'm very pleased to see so many of you here getting involved. We must ensure that our staff have the right skills to meet the growing demand for industry and maintain the momentum. Increasingly, as the world and our local and economy evolve, we must be competitive. The jobs that were once lifelong careers are disappearing from Australian industries, and making lifelong learning is critical for careers to achieve, for people to achieve their career goals here in South Australia. Ensuring the state's workforce is skilled to align to new career opportunities now and in the future is a challenge that only together that we can achieve. And that's why we've revamped the Training and Skills Commission to make sure that we're getting input right down to the factory floor. You're a critical part of the Marshall Government's ongoing efforts to ensure that South Australians are skilled for the transforming industries here in South Australia. And I look forward to the many years of success as we work together to shape South Australia's training system and to meet our industry's needs now and into the future, so South Australians are ready to take full advantage of the opportunities that are coming our way. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Most people in this room are trainers, and you would really feel with me right now when I say the only thing I forgot to do was put the remote thing in for the clicky so that I could change the slide. Sorry. So let me just catch the slides up. Lucky Minister, the speech was so entertaining, nobody even realised that you weren't on the slide, but that's fine. We're all good. We're all good. Before we go on, I just need to do a little bit of housekeeping, so thanks to Madeline for reminding me earlier. Those that you all know me now as Marina, I'm your MC, host and timekeeper for this afternoon, and I'm hoping that you're as excited as I am about getting training providers all together in the room. It's been, for me, a very long time coming, and thanks to people that are streaming in live as well. It's the first time that we've done this for training providers, so really appreciate everybody taking the time to do this. We've got just about as many people inside the room virtually as what we have physically, so I think it's a great achievement. Thanks. Housekeeping. Amenities are just outside and to the right. In case of an emergency, we will wait for the wonderful staff at the Adelaide Convention Centre to literally tell us what to do. We will have a break this afternoon, so around 2 o'clock. The afternoon has got quite a few different things happening, but one thing that I do want to say, because we're live streaming and where there's some interaction, I'm sure I don't need to remind everybody that we're all professionals and we'll make sure that that sort of behaviour is reflected as well. So thank you for that. That's me. Whoa. Okay. I want to introduce you to Slido. Some of you may or may not be aware of this. We're going to be using Slido as your opportunity to post questions about what it is that we're doing today. Like Madeline said, we're really keen to engage. We're really keen to what you have to say. Fantastic for the people that are here in the room. Quite difficult if you're virtually streaming in. So Slido is a great way for everybody to use to ask questions. Before I go on, I just want to speak a little bit about questions and comments. This forum is one of the first ways that we want to try and engage with everybody to find out what people want. And I'm the first to say that any sort of relationship or partnership isn't easy. Quite a few years ago, but just remember that I started training when I was training people, like as in a vet trainer when I was 2. I went to a Reframing the Future, so that's sort of how long ago. I went to a Reframing the Future forum, and I was introduced to something that's really resonated with me. I just wanted to bring it up today because I think it's really important when we think about how we want to move forward that we take a little bit of time to reflect. Appreciative inquiry. So appreciative inquiry is an approach based on strengths rather than weaknesses, or a vision of what's possible rather than what's not. Let's appreciate where we've come from and focus on rediscovering where we want to be. Tap into the potentials that we both hold, all of us together, department, providers, people, and bring it all together. Now let's work on Slido. Everybody's got their phones out because you will be needing them. This is how you connect to us. You can open your browser. If you want to ask questions, you're going to have to do this. Sorry. So open your browser and literally go to www.slido. And you'll be asked to join the event with an event code, TPF19. The way that Slido works is you can post questions anonymously or with your name. They won't come up on the screen, they'll come up onto the Slido platform. And as they come up, everybody will be able to see everybody else's questions. And if you like that question, just vote it, give it the thumbs up. So what happens then is the burning questions, the most popular questions, the most questions we want to have answered will come up. So if you're live streaming, I encourage you to do exactly the same thing. And we're going to manage this throughout the day in relation to presentations. Are we all getting there? This is like what your students feel like, huh? Thumbs up? Not yet. Yeah? Please say to me that it works. Awesome. All right. Let's have a bit of fun with networking. We're going to go about doing this in 2 ways. Those of you that are virtually coming in, do it via Slido, but in the room right now, what we're going to do is I'm going to put a question up on the next slide. I encourage you to work around the table. So in the room here, you don't have to use Slido. If you don't, you can, of course, but it would be great to get a collective response around the table as an answer to the question. If what you find is not being touched by your table, please use Slido. Here's the question. What do you want to hear about or do at training provider forums? Floor's open to you. So I might ask the guys just to put some background music so that I don't have to talk. Have a think about it. We've got a few minutes to... Oh, bless you. Got a few minutes to do this, but it's really important to us that we hear what you have to say. You don't know what's coming, purposely, no agenda. Have fun with thinking about what you want from these forums, please. We will revisit this later on. So just 5 or 6 minutes to have a go at doing this, please. Thank you. Just quickly, on your tables you'll find big post-it notes. Someone's going to have to write them, okay? So your top 3, write them on the post-it note, and we're going to stick them. So we're going to stick them up on the wall. Go Slido, yeah. Yeah, or you can put them straight into Slido, no problems. Just don't forget them. Thank you. This is always the worst part about facilitating. You've got to break up good conversations. Thank you. I can't whistle. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much for doing that. There is a reason, trust me. I hate when somebody says trust me, I know, but there is a reason for it. So it is really important that you've done it. And we're going to revisit it later on, like I said. So before we take a break, which is meant to sort of happen just after 2, there will be 2 presentations. The first one is a little bit of work that was done with some market research prior to launching Skilling South Australia. I think it will be insightful and helpful, and I'd really like to welcome Callum Markwick up to... Oh, geez, I'm so bad with slides today. There we go. Hang on. There we go. So I'd like to welcome Callum, who is hopefully going to be able to give you some insight. Please use Slido for questions for Callum, because we will ask him before he leaves to respond straight away. So use Slido for questions and we can get back. But right now, I'll hand to Callum.
Thanks, Marina, and I will not respond while I'm up on stage, but hopefully by the end of the session. All right, so back in June last year, the department commissioned some market research around the perceptions of vet. Okay, and what we were really looking for in that market research was a real understanding of how is vet perceived, what kind of attitude do employers, potential career seekers and also influencers have around vocational education, but also more specifically traineeships and apprenticeships and the traineeship and apprenticeship system. So we're looking at brand value of traineeships and apprenticeships and really trying to identify some key messaging and approaches that we can use as a department to help shift those perceptions. So as I said, the 3 key target groups that we worked with were employers, potential apprentices and trainees, or career seekers and influencers. And I guess around the same period, from June through till around September when we launched Skilling South Australia, we also did a fair bit of engagement with registered training organisations, and I know a lot of you were in the room for those conversations around what was working, what doesn't work, and what sort of increase or decline you've seen in traineeships and apprenticeships through your RTO. So I'll just really quickly summarise what we got from each group, and again, happy to sort of go into more detail in question time, or otherwise happy to catch up with you at a later time to work through it. So potential apprentices and trainees, I guess it was a fairly positive result. We had, the response meant that nearly half of the career seekers that we spoke to had a high likelihood that they were going to go into a traineeship or apprenticeship, or at least were interested in going down that pathway. And what you can see on the screen there, I guess, is the top 4 reasons why somebody would look at moving into an apprenticeship or traineeship, and the top 4 reasons why people who were unlikely to go down that path weren't interested at that point in time. So it was just a bit of insight really into the perceptions of those potential apprentices and trainees who will form that candidate supply pool. Employer perceptions. Now this one was slightly more positive. So apprentices and trainees were generally viewed very positively by employers, whether they had experienced employing an apprentice or not, which was fantastic. And over half of the employers that we spoke to indicated that there was a high likelihood that they would take on an apprentice or a trainee. Again, top 4 reasons why they would or would not consider a traineeship. And I think important to note that with the top 4 reasons why not, that came from about 16% of the employers that we spoke to who indicated a very low likelihood of taking on an apprentice or trainee. So influencers, really important group in, I guess, encouraging young people through schools to look at or consider traineeships and apprenticeships as a pathway. So when we talk about influencers, we're talking about parents, we're talking about family members, career advisors within the school and also outside of the school. What we got from those influencers was that generally they were quite happy to promote apprenticeship pathways. There were some concerns that they had, and I think really the main one, like what they identified was some advantages and disadvantages that you can see up there on the screen. But generally they perceived apprenticeships and traineeships to be quite valuable. And with the disadvantages, I just wanted to point out, so the one up the top there, time commitment, really relates to school-based apprenticeships, and it was something that they were quite focused on as well, that doing vet subjects within school and doing school-based apprenticeships while trying to also handle a full curriculum, it just meant that there was a huge time commitment from the student. School holidays were out with the employer, and during that balance was really almost unachievable for some of those young people. So this was a core focus for that group to look at how we can actually improve school-based apprenticeships. So from there we went to what's one thing that would encourage you to complete an apprenticeship or traineeship. And encouragingly, earning money while you learn was top of the list, which is fantastic, and I guess really provides us a little bit of insight around messaging and the sorts of things that we can use in talking with career seekers and trying to encourage that increased uptake. Guaranteed job after it. Now, not something that currently exists through apprenticeships and traineeships, although I think, from what we've seen, employers are generally really quite happy to retain apprentices and trainees once they've completed. Even though the training contract might end, they become a really valuable part of the business. So I think there's just, a need from people entering the system to understand that there's a long-term pathway for them, and that they can remain with that employer and have a skilled career. Employers, now this one was interesting. 42% said the subsidies make it worthwhile, which is fantastic. They're already there. We're subsidising training, and as the Minister's just pointed out, there's over 700 qualifications subsidised now to support that training. There's also federal incentives, so the word subsidy I guess could be used both ways, but what's encouraging is that there's not a lot of change needed there to make sure that subsidy exists and that the support's available. The next thing was candidate attitude, quality, work ethic, really important, and links pretty strongly with the pre-apprenticeship approach that we're working through projects, and government support. And I really wanted to point out here a simpler system, a simplified system, and it's again something that we're really focused on. John over there at the table and his team have really been working hard on streamlining employer registration and simplifying the apprenticeship system to respond to this input. Some common misconceptions that we picked up through the market research. Apprenticeships attract less academically minded people. They're low paying once qualified. Really not true, and we've got a lot of evidence to back that up, and I'm sure you all do too as RTOs. One job for the rest of your life. Now, just because you're a qualified tradesperson doesn't mean that you have to stay there and do that job for the rest of your life, but I guess that's a bit of a view that some of the young people had in those discussions. And some assumptions really made around working conditions and cheap labour. But I think, some exposure to that system would smash some of these misconceptions. Employer insight. So we recently attended an event. This is only just last month, and we used Slido at that event. We had quite a few questions coming through from small business, and I just wanted to point out or highlight here some of the insights that we gained at that event. And really what we can do with this is, I suppose, use it to inform our messaging and our market approach, because what we're dealing with is a lot of businesses that just don't know where to start. They really need that basic information and education around what an apprenticeship and traineeship is and how they can access an apprentice, or how they can work with an RTO or connect with an ASIN. It's really going back to basics. And I love what is a group training organisation, because we had some really great advocates up on stage talking about the many apprentices that they have and talking about the approaches that they use, either direct indentured or otherwise through group training organisations. And through that process, obviously a question's come through Slido, what is a group training organisation? And it really brings us back to basics and means that we need to approach things a little bit differently. Just because we know about it doesn't mean that businesses do. So how are we going to change perceptions? Getting there. So as far as changing perceptions, we really want to make sure that apprenticeships and traineeships are shown to be leading to rewarding and well-paid careers. They're great opportunities. We know this. That's why we're here. But how do we get that out to market? How do we make sure that apprenticeships are a first-choice career option? So part of this market research that we've done, well, it's not just about having the information and parking it. Obviously, we need to use it and use it well and respond to the feedback that we're receiving. So, as I said, we have a focus on making VET a first-choice career option. We are launching, or have launched, really, a new marketing campaign and working on a new website, working on new career search tools to help young people navigate industries, occupations and careers and I guess pathways as far as how do you get there. We're doing targeted communications with schools, career seekers and employers and a bunch of other targeted comms around career expos, social media campaign and direct engagement with employers, both large and small. We've got a partnership with the advertiser. You may have seen the double-page spreads in the recent advertisers, showcasing a broad range of industry sectors and pathways and tailored messages for each client group. So we're looking for ambassadors and advocates of skilled careers that we can, use to increase the value of apprenticeships. A government worker telling you how valuable an apprenticeship is might have a little impact. An employer telling you how valuable his or her apprenticeship was, probably going to have a greater impact. And looking at using, obviously, the winners of the training awards, who are fantastic advocates for the system, to get out there and speak with people about their experience and what it means for them. And I won't ask for questions because they're coming through Slido. Thanks, Marina. Okay. Oh.
All right, thanks for taking the time to respond. I just want to say about Slido too, as we go through presentations, we're going to archive the questions. So all of the questions will be responded to and we'll get them out to you. So it's just we have limited time. It's really only the afternoon. Let's have a look. The top question was, are supervisor to apprentice ratios being looked at? Is this proving to be a huge disadvantage to many businesses?
Okay.
Can you take that, or I'll take that, or anybody else?
Yeah, I can take that. So yes, we are reviewing supervisor ratios in consultation with the Training and Skills Commission. So it's a piece of work that's being done through the Commission at the moment.
There's just one more, but because you're already running behind, just so I'm telling you. The getting employers to sign on apprentices in thin markets, is there any insight as to how this could improve?
How it could improve?
Probably making it easier to sign on apprentices in thin markets.
Right, yes.
Good question.
Sorry, in thin markets of employment or?
That's all the information
Okay.
I know.
Can anyone clarify that?
Yeah. So I think when you speak to a lot of employers or businesses in general, business is tough and it's hard to get staff.
Sure.
And making that, when we think about a thin employment market, for example, then how do we? Is there any work that people could do from an RTO perspective to make that a bit easier or better?
Yes, absolutely, and it really starts with promotion of the value of an apprentice. So thin market or not, if an employer is growing, even by a small amount, they're going to need to take on new staff. So it's about showing them the benefits of taking on an apprentice, both young or mature aged, and looking at what can that actually do for a person's business. There's obviously federal incentives, there's other selling points, but I think the starting point is around what is the value to your business, what does it mean for retaining that person, and creating a long-term skilled workforce within the business.
Thanks, Callum. Thank you. Thanks, Callum. Okay, our next presenter is Michael Mackay. Michael's currently working in the department as a principal economic analyst. Michael's going to share with you, he actually sent me a really formal, sorry Michael, I just couldn't say it. I would have to literally just read it. In a nutshell, Michael's going to share with you the relationship between the current and economic conditions here in South Australia and where opportunities for VET sits in that data. Slido for questions, go for it. Michael, as a presenter, he's awesome. He does love to chat. After Michael is the break. So it's entirely up to Michael as to when we go to break. And just like the Oscars though, you know where that music comes on? I've got that cued ready for you. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much. Just like the Minister, I do have a bit of a height issue. There we go, I'm just going to adjust that. Now, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Hopefully I click this forward appropriately. There we go. Okay, so the South Australian economy is in better shape than it was a few years ago. As you see here with employment, in recent years, South Australia has recorded solid employment growth. And that actually followed a number of years where employment was actually declining in the state. And more recently, we've seen the growth rates calm down a bit from the recent sprint to be more in line with the longer-term trends. And the mid-year budget review is projecting that those sorts of growth rates will continue. With that projected growth, in 3.5 years' time, we could have an additional 30,000 South Australians in work. In addition to that, we have to continue to replenish our existing workforce as older workers retire. And we'll have a slide later on that shows this, but VET will actually play a major role in preparing people for these job opportunities. So while it's useful to look at the aggregate picture of the economy, it's also useful to look at the changing industry structure to see which industries are contributing to employment growth. I'm aware many of you, maybe some of you, have seen this moving circle chart. But it is a useful way to get people to connect with this changing landscape. So we're going to take a bit of a journey through time, starting in the year of 1991 and moving through to the future year of 2026. So each circle represents an industry or a group of industries, and if it moves to the left, it means the industry's gone down in employment, and if it's gone to the right, it means that employment has increased. So let's see what happens. So the dark grey circle there is the manufacturing industry, which is moving to the left. You'll see the light blue circle, the healthcare and social assistance industry, moving to the right. A key observation here is that 10 years ago, those two industries actually employed the same number of people. There's now 60,000 workers separating those two industries. So they've been moving in opposite directions. You're about to see that we're going to lose healthcare and social assistance off the side of the slide. Initially, we were like, oh no, we've got to adjust it. And then you realise actually it has a pretty powerful story there that it's gone somewhere over here or something. That was fun. So as you can see, the largest positive shift was for the healthcare and social assistance industry with an ageing population. To a lesser extent, we also had job opportunities or continue to have job opportunities in professional, scientific and technical services, in the education and training industry, in construction, accommodation and food services, public administration and safety, and there are job opportunities in retail, but it's more to do with replenishing the existing workforce. There's a lot of staff turnover in retail trade. Of course, the large decline was in manufacturing. There's been challenging employment conditions for the manufacturing industry, and to a lesser extent, there's been employment declines in the agriculture, forestry and fishing industry, with less labour-intensive production methods prevailing more. There's also a number of government initiatives that will generate jobs. We have the NDIS and defence projects and the creation of additional 20,800 traineeship and apprenticeship commencements over a 4-year period, and the support for entrepreneurship as well, where people create their job rather than fill a job and then in turn create additional jobs. This is a pretty interesting slide. This is a really important slide here. To what extent will VET play a role in preparing people for these future job opportunities? So here we have the share of projected job openings in the coming years across a number of occupational groups. So we have occupations that primarily rely on work experience to develop skills, like the manager jobs. We have the higher education reliant occupations. We have the VET skill level occupations. And we have the occupations that primarily rely on the-job learning. And you'll see there that VET really stands out. There's actually more than 40% of the projected job openings will be for those VET skill level occupations. That's a pretty important story, and I think it gets lost a little bit when we look at the changing composition of the workforce, and there is a shift occurring towards the higher education occupations, but when you look at the actual levels, VET is still a really major player here, more than 40% of the projected job openings being in VET skill level occupations, so it will play a major role in preparing people for these opportunities. So when looking at the current vacancies and the projected job openings, what are the VET jobs that will be most in demand? So I had looking at the occupations that seem to come up again and again, I tried to do some groupings. I think the retail is probably more sales, that grouping, but with the office work we have occupations like the general clerks, the receptionists, the contract program and project administrators, contact centre and call centre workers. For the sales, we have sales representatives, real estate agents. Among the trades, we have motor mechanics, electricians, chefs, metal fitters and machinists, structural steel and welding trades workers. Among hospitality workers that were coming up again and again were the waiters and the bar attendants and baristas. For the carers, we had, of course, the big one, the Asian disabled carers, the nursing support and personal care workers, and child carers. Among the technicians, we had the architectural, building and surveying technicians, the ICT support technicians, the medical technicians. For the drivers, we had the truck drivers, the automobile drivers, the forklift drivers, and of course the earth-moving plant operators and store persons. So you'll be very impressed that I've kept within my 5 minutes, because in summary, look at that, I kept it to 5 minutes. In summary, look, the South Australian economy is in a better position than where it was a few years ago. More recently, the growth rates have calmed down a bit from the recent sprint to be more in line with the longer term trends. And the mid-year budget review is projecting that those sorts of growth rates will continue. And that projected economic growth will generate a variety of job opportunities. And as we've seen, the VET sector will play a major role in preparing people for those future job opportunities. Thank you very much. I love questions on the spot in front of heaps of people.
I'm hoping you might not be able, but there was just some questions about some industries that might not have been represented, like were they buried in the data somewhere? You touched on transport here, but I think there was some comments here around transport, and what about the naval group shipbuilding? How does that factor into where we might be going forwards?
Yeah, so with transport, the transport at ABS, we're dealing with ABS defined industries. So the ABS defined industry is the transport, postal and warehousing, if I've got that right, industry. That industry is actually in one of the other circles that was sort of closer to the middle line. So while there is jobs growth occurring in that industry, I sort of highlighted the ones that were going to have the most significant jobs growth, but that's certainly an industry as well where there's jobs growth, just not in terms of levels, not even dealing with percentages, just in levels, the volume of increase. Those industries that were mentioned, the education and training, professional, scientific and technical services, construction, accommodation and food services, of course healthcare and social assistance, are really carrying the bulk of the job openings in terms of the volume, but certainly in percentage terms there are job opportunities there. There is percentage growth. that industry. We also talk about naval shipbuilding. Yes, that's in there. Unfortunately, the way the ABS has to define their occupations, it's a challenging task to try to capture economic activity in the workforce across the ANZIC classifications. But the defence projects with the jobs that will be created, they kind of sit within a few different industries, within manufacturing, within the professional, scientific and technical services, because professional, scientific and technical services, they include a vast array of skills. You're talking about architecture, engineering, legal and accounting, management and consulting, computer system design. There's a real collection of categories within that. But certainly with the defence projects, there will be quite a wide variety of jobs that will be generated, job opportunities. And when I say variety, you hear that word a lot, but it really is variety, from those professionals and semi-professionals to the trades, to the labourers. We've seen numbers, between now and 2030, there's numbers floating around. Sometimes you see an increase of 4,000 workers that will be needed, 3,000, 5,000, it's sort of around there, not to mention the supply chain effects as well, which could really multiply that figure.
Right on time.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Michael. Wealth of
Thank you.
information. Thank you. Thank you. I've done the questions. I think there's a coffee break now. Excellent. So if you make your way out to the foyer, if you're here, if you're virtually streaming in, please go and make yourself a coffee and put your feet up for about 25 minutes. If we could reconvene back here at 2:25 so that we can start at 2:30, that would be fantastic. Everything's literally outside these doors in the foyer area. Thank you so much.
bring it in. will adjust the level that each one gets. So if you then
And then do you think that one's okay over there, or put it more behind the back? Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, that was very loud. Sorry. Thank you. Thanks for coming back. Hopefully, those that have live streaming in, that you're back in the room now too. So welcome. I hope your coffee break was as good as mine. What we're going to do now is welcome to the lounge a little for a chat. Not really the lounge. It's really what we thought might be interesting for everybody to find out today is to find out literally a bit about what's happening within the skills and workforce capability teams and the functions. It's very tricky, I know, working in RTOs sometimes, that we know that engaging with the department happens for reasons and we do different things, but it's about who does what. And there has been some changes and some reshuffles. So I'm going to call up Sharon Ferrier to introduce, and a panel of directors that literally make up the skills and workforce capabilities leadership team. So Madeline Richardson with her team of Chris Zielinski, John Evangelista, Callum and Heidi. Thank you. Please, as usual, Sharon's got questions. I know she engaged with a lot of people before coming in. If you've got any questions, use Slido. And I do need to confirm as well, what we can't answer today, this panel's sort of got about 20 minutes time allocated for it. So what we can't answer today, take on notice and get the questions out to you. So here we go, Sharon.
Thank you. Well, one of the questions was, what's for afternoon tea? But I think we can agree that we actually had an excellent afternoon tea, but there was no butterscotch biscuits. So for the person that did say, will there be butterscotch biscuits at afternoon tea, I do apologise, we weren't able to arrange that at such short notice. But it's interesting, some of the questions that were being asked, a few of you I chatted to, I came around and said, what are your burning issues? And it was really interesting because I got some feedback saying, look, there's been a great improvement in funding, and particularly in foundation skills, and that's really exciting. And they mentioned a couple of names. They mentioned you, Marina, and they mentioned Adriana as well. They said they're great people to work with. So well done, Marina and Adriana. But I also found out that the changes in funding have been a bit challenging for a few industries. And one of the industries was the heavy transport industry, and they said, look, it's challenging because we've had a cut in mentoring funding, and for our type of training that's really pivotal. They also really important. They also said it was challenging when there was a very slow turnaround with the funding, and they wanted greater predictability with that. So this led me to think on that, with the funding, with the changes, how are the funds being allocated? And I said I wouldn't pick on Chris first, but I lied. So Chris, can you please talk to the group about how is this funding being allocated with the changes that we've seen?
Hello. Hey, there we are.
Go, yay.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So the department goes through an annual process of planning to try and direct funding through the primary mechanism is the subsidised train list. There are effectively three questions that we ask. One is, what are the skills needed for the state? Where is government support needed? And what should government purchase? So I'll just talk very briefly about those. The need aspect draws really heavily on the Training and Skills Commission work. So they do a process of forecasting demand for skills across the economy. You saw Michael present on some of that. He drew on those numbers. So it shows change across the industry sectors and therefore what courses and/or sectors will need to be skilled going forward. The Training and Skills Commission also do the Industry Priorities Qualification Survey, which indicates what are the highest priority qualifications for industry. And then we consider internally, we look at the supply side to see what's currently happening, what's happening in the fee-for-service market, and therefore where government needs to intervene to try and fill that gap and or support skills more broadly. So that's the moving into the second question, which is where government support is needed. What government should purchase really gets down to our overall budget envelope. need to be able to manage that. We also have a commitment to existing students and supporting them to complete their training. So the process, in my mind, quite simple, which is understanding the need, looking at what else and how government can complement the investment in the sector, and then where government really should intervene based on what budget's available and to get the best sort of outcome for industry more broadly.
Thank you for that, Chris. And I did neglect to introduce the team, so I'll pass on to Madeline. Can you introduce the team for me?
Thanks, Sharon. And look, you've obviously met a couple of us already. John Evangelista, hi John. So John looks after within our group the training and apprenticeship services. So think all things regulation, all things employer reg, making sure our system runs really well. And as you heard earlier, that commitment to ensuring it's streamlined and really responsive. Heidi Graves is from the Office of the Training and Skills Commission, the engine room behind the Commission. Callum Markwick from Skilling South Australia projects team. Skilling South Australia and its significance warranted and warrants a really dedicated response within our division. And Callum works with the team to ensure that we are out as much as possible, meeting with you and talking about how we can support key projects. And Chris Zielinski, as everyone has just heard from, looks after our planning and investment area, which I think you've probably covered off a lot of what's in scope there. Thanks, Sharon.
Oh, thanks, Madeline. Now, one of the other things that came up, and this came up in a couple of the groups that I spoke to, is the standard of trainers. We're talking about apprenticeships and skilling people, but what about skilling trainers? So the question, and I'm going to direct this to you, John, because you've got your back to me, and so I'm going to pick on you. How will the state, he's getting nervous now, how will the state support improvement in trainer methodology and effectiveness and capability? So how can we skill our trainers to, or how will the state support that to provide the best training? Oh, come on. You eat this for breakfast.
This is a great question for... Hello. Okay. Great question for Marina, where she's hiding. Chris will do it. Chris will do it. I'll hand over to Chris gladly, but I think today is probably a good kick-off point, and Marina spoke earlier on about how we're looking to work very closely with the industry to really understand your needs and requirements and how we can best work closely with you. Marina outlined at the start that this is the first in a series of events that we hope to run just to fully understand the needs of the industry and how we can best help you address those. But Chris, you're more than happy to...
So I guess the sector needs a level of investment in the skills. So, recently we've made the relevant courses, TAE courses, accessible and they're funded. We're dipping our toes in, so that's an acknowledgement that there is a need in the sector. So we're funding courses through the subsidised trainers. This today is the start of a broader development program or framework, which we'll hear more about later, so I don't want to steal other people's thunder. So we're very conscious that the sector, we want to grow with the sector, so making training funding available and other support services available to strengthen the sector.
Excellent.
Super quick thing. And very, very quickly, the three complementary and, if you like, interdependent parts here in what we all turn up each day to try to chip away at is how we strengthen that industry voice, ensure the system is really responsive, and work with you to design and deliver projects that meet your need. Those three things are what we're really focused on, and that drive and our kind of key priorities fall out of those three things that are really interdependent as well.
Good. Now, I've got a couple of other questions, but do keep in mind that you've got Slido. Now, any questions that we don't have time to address today will be addressed and emailed out to everybody. The other thing that came up, and Heidi, I think you might be the best person to answer this, is how is your department going to meet the target for the number of traineeships and apprenticeships? I mean, how are we going to skill South Australia?
I think that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Look, it is a significant target. So part of the government's commitment around Skilling South Australia was, as the Minister mentioned earlier, the commitment to revitalising the Training and Skills Commission and Industry Skills Councils. Now, Industry Skills Councils met for the first time last Friday, and what it means we've got access to is around about 90 key industry and employer representatives who are going to be able to provide us a really good platform of industry intelligence around what skills and training needs are for industry. We had about 180 applications to be a part of that process, but we also need to keep in mind that what we're going to be doing around industry engagement through those 80 or so people and their networks is really getting down to the nub of what industry needs are. And I think part of the flow-on effect, and this goes to the question you've asked, is that by engaging with industry in determining what skills and training priorities are, we are going to hopefully be able to actually get more industry on board in terms of taking on apprentices and trainees. So, you know, getting really good intelligence and information is just a fundamental part of that entire process.
Yep, thank you. And leading on to that, it was quite interesting. I was chatting to a guy today, he said, but what if we're an RTO and if we see that there's a skill gap? And I said, oh, really, what skill gap have you seen? He said, well, we need to train people to make guns. And I'm going, really? Where's the gun guy? Put your hand up. Is he still there? He is, yay. And, you know, so we're saying, and I'm going, that's a niche market for you. He goes, oh, but it's a growing market because of this and this and this. So what if we see something, and can RTOs successfully fund for courses that are not on the subsidised traineeship and apprenticeship lists? And I thought, well, that's a good question. So, Callan, I'm going to throw that one to you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Heidi. And just double backing on a couple of the others. So the Cert 4 in TAE is also a traineeship, just flagging that. Understand that there are some ASQA requirements that might prevent that being a large-scale thing, but happy to talk to anyone around a project that might overcome those barriers. Come and see me.
He'll be handing out his business card with his personal home address and phone number on there shortly.
Yeah, or yours, Sharon. Yes, if there is a qualification that is a traineeship or an apprenticeship that's not currently on the subsidised training list, it can still be funded through the department. Please talk to us. As we've said, there's over 700 qualifications available. Nearly all qualifications from the traineeship and apprenticeship pathway schedule are now funded through the department, but it doesn't mean that we haven't missed some that were maybe just not being utilised, no demand, niche areas. So definitely happy to speak to anyone about skills gaps that are being identified. I guess the mechanism for how we would fund something that's not on the STL is through Skilling South Australia projects. So it's a targeted project approach to meet a workforce need, and we would work with you to co-design something that works.
Okay, so where's the other, and just leading on from that question is, what are the channels? Where do they start? Who do they, you know, like, okay, I've got this idea, who do I call, or do I look on the website first?
Sure. So we have a statewide advisory service that the Minister mentioned earlier. That group of advisors, they'll meet with you face-to-face and work through the issues. I think the starting point really is our info line or our website. We've got live chat. We can put through inquiries or ideally pick up the phone and speak to a person. So our advisory service really starts with the phone lines and through our client services team, and then flows on where there's a need for sort of face-to-face meetings and people getting out externally and working with business in their business, and we can provide that service, like I said, right across the state through our regional managers and our central advisors.
Thank you. I'm going to handball to Marina now. Do we have any questions from Slido that we can add to the mix? Subsidising a course, oops, nope, the next one, aged care, which one's just point to, oh, that's right.
Oh, it's probably shifting now.
Yes, it is shifting. That's all right. Oh, that one. Okay, question. Do you have people from the aged care sector on the Industry Skills Council panel?
Yes, we do. So the chair of the Health, Disability, Aged Care and Community Services ISC is Juanita Walker, and she works for Whyalla Aged Care. There are also a couple of others representing the disability sector and somebody from community, from CARA. So I think it is very well represented.
Excellent, thank you for that. And we're just getting another question from Slido. As I mentioned, any of these questions that aren't being addressed today on the panel will be sent out via email so that everyone can get a copy of some of the answers there as well. Okay, so I'm going to throw this to the group here. What engagement is occurring with Regional Development Australian boards in terms of understanding industry training needs? Who'd like to answer that?
I'll start,
Hardy?
but there might be others. So part of the Training and Skills Commission's remit is to also consider regional matters, and they actually produce regional profiles. Part of the process of doing that is engaging directly with the RDAs. But I think one of the beauties of this new model around industry skills councils is that there is a really strong representation from regions across several of the industry skills councils themselves. So ensuring that there is a regional focus still remains a high priority for the Training and Skills Commission, but also making sure that there's some really good regional representation occurring has also been a priority. You know, we are also working really closely with regional managers and the advisor network in the department as well, so that, you know, if there are issues that come up that fall outside of the Training and Skills Commission's remit, then we can actually refer them to the broader networks within our own organisation.
So just, I guess, going back to prior to launch of Skilling South Australia, we did quite a targeted engagement approach and made sure that RDAs were included as part of that and that they were able to input into the design of Skilling South Australia. Since then, there's been regular engagement through the regional managers, but also myself and the manager of regions, John May, who have just recently, in the last couple of weeks, met with a number of the RDAs around I guess that on-the-ground intel, as well as looking at project approaches and how we can address some of the barriers in regions.
Excellent.
And importantly, we're hitting the road as well, right? So I think the conversation here today, we're looking to make sure that we have a really proactive regional engagement program where we can go and talk to businesses, talk to schools, talk to people that will have us in their boardroom or in their tea room and chat about what we're doing and the opportunities available. So you will hear from us soon about where we'll be in certain regions and how you can come and have a chat to us, and also thinking about how we can offer some services through that engagement as well. So there's an important conversation that we can have, but what else can we come to you and do and work with you to either help solve on the spot or set up another conversation to work with your team really closely as well. And the other thing that I'll just touch on, a great question about how do we get in touch with you. So there's a whole range of ways to do it, as Callan outlined. If those don't work for you, tell us. So we can't make those changes unless I'm hearing your feedback directly about, you know what, that web chat's great, but it's not delivering this level of service. Or actually, you know, the phone line's an excellent place for triaging, but we need this additional information. So please help us in how we refine and tailor that to meet your needs as well.
And folks, that's time. But I thank you for talking to me. Thank you for passing on your burning issues and your curly questions. And please join me in thanking the panel.
Thanks, Sharon, and to everybody on the panel. It's always a bit daunting, I think, just to sort of be here and be hammered with questions. I've just been looking at some of the Slido inputs, and I didn't really raise or steer the questions around teachers and trainers so much to the panel. I think John did a nice deflection. That's all about what Marina is going to talk, what we're going to do. And it really does lead me to the next part. This is where we're going to finish off on. You would have heard some discussions across the panel about the sorts of work that the department, especially our division, is doing. But what we're really here today, well, no, I can't really say that because we're here to hear a lot of things, but something that is really close to my heart is the development of teachers and trainers. And those of you that know me, we have worked together in this space previously, and nationally, I think, especially because of the questions that are coming through about issues with compliance, issues with getting trainers, attracting people to the industry, they're being felt by everybody across the state, regionally and locally. So providers and the people that work in them play such an important role. We've heard about that so much, but I think when you work in training and assessment and you're a trainer and assessor, that interaction between that student, when that penny drops and you know that they've got it, is not an easy thing to cultivate in a person. People don't wake up or get out of school and say, I think I'm going to be a vet teacher, like not as an animal vet even, I'm going to be a vet teacher. It doesn't happen. We go through different journeys, but we bring a lot to that space. And then we get into a world where we actually have to think about compliance and we have to think about being good educators, and that's what we have to be, is really good educators. So I'm going to let Juliana tell you the next bit, but this is what we're here for. For me, this next presentation, sorry about everybody else, but this is about the jewel in the crown. It's about what we want to do with you and for you throughout the rest of the year, and promising to deliver on this framework that we've been talking about all afternoon. So here's Juliana. You can ask her questions too.
And I can pass them on to Marina, she's right there. Look, thank you everyone. I'm going to say thank you, Marina, for the great introduction, but really she is incredibly passionate about this, so am I, those of you that I've worked with in the past. We have other team members that are also equally passionate. Irena and Emma are here today, and this is as a result of all of that, but really, without stealing Marina's thunder, because I feel that except she can't MC and do this at the same time, I'm going to present to you what's on offer for professional development this year. And just building on what Marina has said already, one of the things that I remember was my first VELD conference a few years ago, and some of my friends from that day are still here because that's what training providers do. They network, they make friends, they share, they come up with solutions together. That's what education is all about. I see some people nodding, that's great. But at that VELD conference, I didn't realise until that day how big the vet sector is as an industry. It's huge. And I'm keeping my hands down because I was going to go, it's huge. But I remember walking into what I'm going to call a warehouse, which is like a microcosm of vet. And in it were all the, I'm going to say peripherals. So the person that can give you compliance services, that can give you materials to do that as well. The finance people that can give you internet payment systems, and you can do all sorts of things through the cloud. The list goes on, and I was so amazed at how much there was. But then when the bell rings, you walk into those auditoriums and rooms like this, that's where all the RTOs go, that's where all the trainers go, and they're there to get something out of it so that they can make their teaching and learning better. They want to keep getting better at it. So what we've got on offer this year, we've always made a good effort with PD, I think, but this year the state government, with the Commonwealth contribution as well, has really given us the opportunity to put something on the table that if you are here this year in South Australia in 2019 and you want to do some professional development, invest in yourself, invest in your RTO, you might like to tap into some of these. There we go. So there's quite a few there, nice headings. Here's the first one, Training Provider Forum. We're going to have more of these. We're going to have them quarterly, which means we've only got 3 to go. But this Training Provider Forum, the reason it's on a Friday afternoon is that when Marina consulted with people, they said, make it a Friday afternoon, you'll get more people to come. So we're here on a Friday afternoon. I'm guessing the next one's on a Friday afternoon, Marina, that's right. So we're listening to that kind of information from people. That's fairly simple. We're live streaming because we've always been conscious of people coming in wherever they can. If you can come here and meet people face to face, that's terrific. But if you can't come, hopefully those live streaming options will always be there. Teaching and learning pods. Did that light up? Good. So teaching and learning pods, they're little snapshots along the way. And again, if, assessment is a big deal for trainers, we sort of can't get away from that. It's actually not a bad thing, but it does elevate, I guess, the outcomes. But when we have these teaching and learning pods, whether it's on assessment, whether it's on foundation skills, whatever it might be, compliance, they're going to be snapshots. Maybe a breakfast meeting in the morning, it could be a webinar recording, but it'll be like an hour and a half, something you can take away, do something with, and hopefully then use in your workplace, bring back to your workplace. Or you might like to keep going with that and find a community of practice that that is focusing on assessment or is focusing on foundation skills as well, or whatever else it might be. Well, there's only 3, I think, communities of practice, but you'll be able to tap into that as well. And we will be going out to people so that it's not always in the same place. We're very aware of regional needs, that they too want to have an experience like this. And then maybe the people in the city can live stream in if they don't want to come that far. Master classes for the advanced practitioner, because we really would like to think that there are specialists here in areas of assessment in the workplace, particularly when we're looking at a traineeship and apprenticeship situation. How do we, I love it when I'm seeing people nodding, I'm glad to see that. Traineeship and apprenticeship system, how assessment works in the workplace, understanding the core skills framework, literacy and numeracy is a big focus, and increasingly South Australia has quite a profile with the work we've done in this area, and we want to stay ahead of the game and lead that way too. E-learning, I'm a big convert now. I don't know how to do it so much, but I just really, well, I don't, but I am learning. But I just think that that's something that for contemporary modern learning environments we have to sort of engage, be confident in, know how to use well. And the fourth one, action-based learning, again, strong application to trainees and apprentices in any situation so they can bring in that experience, work on a project that's meaningful to them, works for the training organisation and the employer. We're also going to be looking at offering some building capability project. Well, there'll be some applications for that in innovative markets. Some of the questions today were about how do we get into a thin market? What's a different way of delivering? What if someone wants an accredited course? How do we go about doing that? We're going to provide that support to our South Australian training providers to try and meet those gaps and develop the market further. So that looks like it's all for the trainer and assessor, which it is, but you do need that RTO to be supported as well, because as an organisation, when the trainer comes back and says, I really want an e-learning platform, thank you, and they go, well, that's great, how do we go about doing that? Or we need to get more students from a certain sector, how do we engage with them? So this year, we're actually also offering workshops for, I've got a feeling I'm behind in my lighting up. No? Okay, good, sort of different here, thank you. We've got some support for RTOs as well, for the educational leaders, for the business managers there too, so that they can tap into some workshops that help them with their organisational culture or maybe their marketing and social media. There's a whole range of workshops that will be available for them to help them grow their business, to expand into new markets if necessary. And, sometimes you go away from a workshop and it's good for the training and for the vet practitioners. You can be an advanced practitioner and go to a masterclass and really hone those skills and be a leader, which we really are hoping you're going to share at a forum like this or on a webinar or any way you can so that others can benefit from it. Or you might be a novice and you'll go to a community of practice in a teaching and learning pod, but you'll come away inspired. If an RTO business leader goes to a workshop, they really want to do a lot of things as a result of that because they're inspired, but it's really good if they can touch base with someone to think, okay, so I want a new marketing strategy, I'm going to do that. If only there was someone I could talk to or could help me through. So we've got our business mentoring leaders that are going to be able to provide that support. So you'll be able to go to them and say, I'd like to explore this a bit further for my business. Can you help me out? I want to change the organisational culture of my workforce and how I'm doing this, or I want to change my management strategies so that I get more out of it. So we're sort of tackling, as Madeline said earlier, the whole picture, that holistic picture of supporting, my hands are going, supporting the trainer and assessor to just keep growing and getting better and responding to the changing needs. It sounds like a bit of a slogan of the learner, the learning environment and all that it has to offer. But similarly, we want those RTO leaders. We want our RTOs to get bigger. All of the goals that we have for real careers, for apprentices and trainees, none of that in vet, and you saw Michael's slide how big vet's going to be, or is, that big warehouse that I talked about before. We can't do that without the good RTOs that we have in this state and without them getting better, and we really can't do that without good practitioners in front of those students and working to just make it better, more accessible, relevant for everybody that's in that space. So I guess if you're going to do some PD, you want to do it this year in particular, and you might want to think, which one am I going to do? Which one am I going to get my staff to do? Have I got somebody new? Can I move them into these places? It won't move. Why not? No, the next slide. I'll keep tapping. Okay, thank you. So, thank you. So how do you get involved? Well, you probably need to stay informed. Many of you know who we are, so that's easy. But we do have, and you will get all of these, I believe, all of these PowerPoints today as a PDF, so you'll have the URL here to receive updates on when you can register for the next Training Provider Forum in May, or the masterclass when that's announced, which will be pretty soon in the next couple of weeks. We can keep you posted on that. Alternately, if you're not sure, you can't find any of this information, ring the Skilling South Australia info line number. The staff know what to do, and they can give you all of this information, or they can direct you to the team. If you really want to know something particularly specific, I have to give credit to where it's due. Marina is the architect, although she did, as I said, consult with the sector widely to make sure that this is going to work for everybody and what's really needed. So, and if you can't get her, they know where we are too. So someone will answer your questions. Now, I always think what stops you, I'm just waiting for the Oscar music, what stops you from accessing PD. Quite often it's money. That's okay, because this is fully subsidised for you so that you can access any of this. Sometimes it's time, and we have no control over your time. So, but I'm sure you're pretty organised people, and you will find time to tap into some of these offerings as they roll out throughout the year. I'm trying to think of other reasons that maybe you wouldn't do it, and I actually can't think of any. I really can't, but you might have a question, and then that might be something that if I can't answer today, or Marina can't, because she'll be up here with me, we'll make sure to address it. Just remember though, everything we do will be, all the resources will be made available to you. Sorry, Marina. All the resources will be made available to you. It's about sharing with each other, which from my own experience and even over working in government in the last few years, educators do that all the time. I have this problem, no worries. I did this, try it. So, but talk to us, we're actually the same. We're just people too. If you've got an issue, we're more than happy to hear possible solutions and see what we can do to help you do that. Okay.
Thanks, Juliana.
Okay.
Bring it on, bring it on.
Yeah. We're ready.
We're ready, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to say we've got hardly any questions. That's fantastic. So, but lots of really great comments that I did really want to share. Will you be sending a recording of this session? Yes, that's a short answer. This is the most fantastic news I've heard in ages.
Oh.
Best outcomes for South Australia will come from best trainers. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Feeling quite relieved that RTOs are going to get such great support from the South Australian Government, absolutely. And will you issue attendance confirmations such as attendance certificates so that trainers can evidence the PD? Absolutely.
We're on it.
There we are.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Juliana.
You. No worries.
Oh, wait, my notes. Hang on. Give me 1 sec. Sorry. I'll say the wrong thing. We'll put the wrong slide up. That'll happen. Okay, our second snapshot. We've talked Skilling South Australia all afternoon. You can see how important it is to us and how passionate it is as we move forward, how important it is to us and how passionate we are about it. I'm going to invite Callum to come back as Chief Advisor, literally, in this position around the Skilling South Australia projects that are sort of happening and going, and all things Skilling South Australia. There were a lot of questions that came through earlier, specific, so hopefully Callum will be able to address quite a few of those specific to Skilling South Australia. So thanks, Callum.
Thanks for having me back again. I'm going to give you a little bit of a recap of Skilling South Australia. I'm conscious that there's quite a large number of training providers in the room that don't currently contract to us as a state government, which is fantastic. It's really good to see. However, what that does mean is that there's some of you that have heard this many, many times and probably a number of times in the last 2 weeks. So sorry for the recap. I think just going back to some of the panel questions as well, so I think there was a question asked around how we're going to skill South Australia, and Heidi did a fantastic job in talking about, I suppose, giving industry a greater voice and that focus on industry input in achieving that. I just wanted to double back and say the two other components of that we see really clearly are that we need to build a candidate supply, that we need career seekers to want to do traineeships and apprenticeships. So it's about making VET attractive again and ensuring that they have the right skills and that they're work ready to go into the business. The other side of that is about having a really strong, capable VET sector full of RTOs that have capacity to grow, increase scope and develop with this project as well to I guess, accept an extra 20,800 new enrolments over the next 4 years. So that's obviously a huge part of it, and that's why you're here. So this government's commitment under Skilling South Australia is to support an additional 20,800 apprentices and trainees from 2018 through to 21-22. That's in line with the national partnership agreement that we've signed with the Commonwealth. And I guess it's important to note that this is following a really quite prolonged decline in apprenticeship and traineeship activity that we've had over the last 5 years. I think I've got up there on the slide, down by 55%. So we're looking at a 52% growth over the next 4 years to get us back on track, and that's what this is about. It's something that's been slipping over many years, and we need to get back on track. As part of the National Partnership Agreement, the Commonwealth are inputting $103 million into the state, and the state government have kindly matched that with $100 million of their own dollars to support the 20,800 apprenticeships, and that's how we're able to look at funding what we are with Skilling South Australia projects, additional courses on the subsidised training list, and all the other components of this that are going to address those three really core things around supply of candidates, industry voice, and capability and capacity in the VET market. I won't dwell on this one. We are about increased choice for students and employers, and hence the changes to the subsidised training list, but I'm going to skim over that because I know Chris is going to give us a more detailed overview of that and how we got there. Thanks, Chris. Skilling South Australia projects. So we're really committed to working with industry, as well as training providers, industry associations, group training organisations, all of our sort of core stakeholders that we're working with at the moment to co-design flexible, tailored projects. And look, I'm looking around the room now, and I know that I'm working personally with many of you at the moment around projects, and that you're working with our advisors. So really, really great to see you here. For those of you who are not, happy to have conversations. So we want to meet the needs of industry, and I think something that's I guess changed the landscape a little bit around Skilling South Australia is that it's not just about new workers. We are able to support existing worker traineeships and apprenticeships as well. Again, we're focused on entry-level pathways, new workers. We want to see the employment growth. But however, we understand that to do that, you need to build and support a healthy, strong workforce to ensure that you can employ people coming through those pathways. And as Heidi pointed out, we have revitalised the Training and Skills Commission, as well as strengthened industry's voice by establishing the 8 new industry skills councils that met for the first time last week. And it was quite a buzz. And I guess it's through Skilling South Australia, we're working with the ISCs and developing industry-specific plans. We want to work with each ISC around strategies that will support skilled careers and address their workforce needs. And part of that for us is just really understanding what those barriers are and working through them and coming up with some solutions, and not doing it back in the office, but doing it there at the table with industry, and getting that buy-in at the same time. And there are at least 3 ISC members that I've seen here today as well. So, do I call you out, Adam? Our signature projects. This is something that that was part of our national partnership agreement, and really a clear strategy for us in that we've released the Skilling South Australia project guidelines. We've got a number of applications that we're working through and in co-design at the moment, but signature projects was something where if an industry sector came to us and said, we really don't know how we're going to address traineeships within our industry, what can we do about it? It was that collaborative kind of top-down approach of, all right, well, let's work with you, let's come up with some kind of a strategy, and we will coordinate and connect that and make it happen. So I'll just quickly touch on a couple of them. The Disability Sector Traineeship Pilot Program. So we launched this in December 2018. It was led by the National Disability Services and aims to deliver 80 traineeships for the sector. We've got 2 group training partners who are working with the RTOs and identifying suitable candidates for traineeships. Essentially what we've done there is looked at an industry that would struggle to provide the minimum 15-hour part-time requirement for a traineeship per week, and said, what can we do about that? And I think the initial response was, why don't we work with group training organisations who at that point in time weren't servicing the industry? How do we develop those GTOs to ensure that they can add to their scope, service the disability industry, and provide traineeship opportunities where they might be hosted across multiple employers? I think another one worth noting is flexible apprenticeships. So flexible is actually being led by the Department for Education. It implements the government's commitment to increase the use of flexible apprenticeship pathways, which allows school students to complete the first year of their training contract concurrently with their SACE. Now, we have school-based apprentices already. We have ASBAs, many of you know, but again, through that market research and the consultations that we did, it was really clearly pointed out that it puts a lot of pressure on the young person and that something needs to change in this space. So we are working really closely with the Department for Education, and there are some pilots that are being implemented right now across a number of schools. Have I kept to time? Okay. Sure.
Can you answer that?
So yeah, existing employees can be put on a traineeship. There's considerations that you need to make, such as IR impacts, and also the federal incentive may not be available depending on their eligibility. But are they eligible through Skilling South Australia to be a trainee? Yes, they are. And the training would be subsidised through the subsidised training list. No worries.
Just a bit of personalised question answering. It was something about the information on our website, and I just, we're in between websites, so it's not tricky to find. It is difficult to find, I shouldn't say that. Sorry, it's not that easy to find. The question was about, I have to say it now, don't I? So the question was about ISCs. The lists of ISCs are available on the our skills website somewhere. in a really, really good place. But I just said to Jenny, who asked the question, I'll get her the link, and everybody else, because it's a question now. Let's move on. Last but not least, right, we are making great time today, so thank you to everybody who's done such an awesome job. Last but definitely not least, Chris is going to come up and talk to us about the STL, his knowledge and understanding, and he needs to have good understanding around this for many reasons, is the reason why he's here today. So I'd like to call him up. Again, use Slido for questions about anything that he says, but I think you'll make him very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Firstly, I just want to thank everyone for their attendance today. Really appreciate you all making the time. It's very important in order for us to achieve what we want to achieve, particularly around Skilling South Australia, but just skilling in general for the economy. So it's really important that you're all here today. What I thought, because I'm conscious, and Callum made reference to it, that half of you that are here contract with us currently, and the other half don't. So I thought what was best to do was just to give a bit of a broad outline of the subsidised trainees, and then just give some basics around how to engage, and also some of the rules and conditions around it. I thought that might be useful, and then a bit of an update in terms of some of the changes we've made recently. So I'm hoping it'll be a bit of a first step for some to engage, look through our website and find opportunities there for us to have a conversation. Yes. So what is the STL? I had planned to talk to you in detail around the investment planning process. I'm not going to do that. I touched on it before. What I thought I would just add to in terms of the STL is there are those three questions that we ask ourselves, but then, and we rely on the Training Schools Commission modelling, we also do our own intel and engagement to try and verify and validate that. We also, as part of our main sort of release, talk to a range of provider peaks, industry associations, and other stakeholder groups, particularly the schooling sector as well, just to make sure that we're on the right track with what courses we want to release. So the STL is really the main mechanism that we identify the courses that will be publicly subsidised, and the driver of it is that it tries to align as much as possible to what's needed for industry. So that's our driving force. It communicates the places and the conditions for government funding. So for those that are not familiar with it, I encourage you to look at it. We've made some changes recently, and I'll go through those in a minute. But it outlines the places available and which students can access. Updated twice a year. So there is a major release. We're embarking on that now. It's for a May release, which comes into effect from 1 July. That is where we try to make the biggest change to set, I guess, training up for the financial year, because that's how we work. Then there is a more routine release around November with an effective date of 1 January or thereabouts. So we've just gone through a routine release, which wasn't really routine in this instance, which I'll talk more to in a minute. But that's sort of the process we go through on an annual cycle. STL. I just want to make a couple of points here in terms of how you can influence it. So I know the question was asked when we had the panel session around so the gun guy, how can we get the skill or a skill gap acknowledged or identified? So Callum gave the response around working through Skilling South Australia. There's also at any time can interact with the department and ask for the course to be considered to be added to the STL. So there's a process through our website. Encourage you to look at it. If there is a skill gap, you can go through that mechanism. Also working very closely with the ISCs as they establish will be critical for that piece. So just there are a number of avenues in addition to just the Skilling South Australia and the advisors that can work with you for projects. Okay. So, how do you access funded training? First of all, RTO's registered with ASQA. Got to be registered with ASQA. I'm going to give some very simple steps. That's probably a little bit more complicated than that, but largely these are the ones that are important. You have to have a head agreement with the department. So there's a process. Encourage you to look at our website. It'll work through the process. John Evangelista, who you met before, is the go-to on all things contracting. So I encourage you to speak to him. You're welcome, John. You have to have, so sitting under the head agreement, you have to have an accredited training service agreement, which basically says these are the services that you're contracted with the department to offer, and there's a scope of courses that you work through with the department on to have those added, and that's what you can deliver and then draw down from the subsidised training list. Oh, the last one popped up too quick. Upfront assessment of need. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with it. It is a prescribed process that we have, which is really about supports for your students. There's a process they go through. We need to understand what their foundation skills needs are and other requirements. It's about understanding how training providers can best support them. So it is a process that there's an expectation that providers will go through. Information on our website around what that involves. And learner support services there, that's really a complementary piece in my mind. It's around, we have about 5, I think, learner support service providers. The expectation is that training providers will have an arrangement or a service level agreement with those providers, and they're there to really support the students with a range of sort of case management aspects, right? It's really about supporting the student to successfully complete their training. So those two are an important piece. And once you have those 4, then you can train and we can pay you. Subsidies are paid on completion of units, and the cycle of payment is generally on a monthly process. It involves putting in a claim. I thought it would be useful just to, and I'll only do it quickly because it's a little bit more complicated than what's on the slide there. So there is eligibility and entitlement conditions for students in order to access publicly subsidised training. I've got them up there. Eligibility, living and working in South Australia, Australian citizen or an eligible visa holder, and 16 years and over. The entitlement piece there is really dependent on a student's previous level of qualification and also their employment status. So at the top end, there is up to 1 Certificate 2 that can be accessed, up to 2 Certificate 3 or higher courses, and then there's 1 foundation skills course and bridging units up to 5 to complement the training. So it does depend on the level of qualification though that the student has when they come to you. And an important piece here is the exemptions. So traditional trades, across the board are exempt from the entitlement conditions. So if you have a student that wants to undertake an apprenticeship, there should be no barrier from that perspective. It is also available special circumstance exemptions as well for other courses. It's just a contact point within the department through our website and then we can arrange it. But it's more around entry-level courses that individuals need to get into the workforce. What we try to avoid is a lot of churn for students, so exemptions are not generally granted for just churning of students at different levels. It's more about the entry point. So, recent changes to the STL. This is what Callan set me up for. Very much at the moment around choice and access. So, we have taken great steps to increase the number of courses accessible through the subsidised training list. There are now over 780 available. Minister mentioned in his opening address, 90% of courses are open to what I'll call choice or contestability, which means it's available to TAFE and non-government providers, which is a big increase from where we were a year or so ago. There are also 700 courses that are accessible on demand and unlimited under training contract arrangements. So clear focus there on supporting Skilling South Australia objectives and trying to remove any barriers to enabling that to happen. We have also simplified the communication around subsidised training lists. So for those that are or have been familiar with the subsidised training list, it was very dense document with lots of different rows and columns in it. We heard from through our engagement that it needed to be simpler and had to communicate it simpler. So in this iteration, we now have 2 versions of the STL. Sounds, hey, you made it more complicated. But the training priorities list is really focusing on around 280 courses that can be done outside of a training contract arrangement. So, examples there are some of the school enrolled courses and also foundation skills courses, or where there's traditionally not been a training contract arrangement pathway. So it's around 280 courses on the list. The second one there, which is a subsidised traineeship and apprenticeship list, that is the main go-to for all things Skilling South Australia. There's over 700 courses on there, and as mentioned before, on demand, unlimited, under training contract arrangement. So it's the go-to source for what courses can be accessed or funded for under a training contract arrangement. And that's me. Oh, damn it. Thank you, Marina, for that feedback. I appreciate it.
There's a question about eligibility here. Do the eligibility requirements also refer to apprenticeships under Skilling South Australia projects?
So eligibility, so training contract, yes, I believe it does. So they have to be, still apply. The age is, I think, one differing piece, because there's ASBAs that can be supported, so it can go to those that are 15 years of age. I think generally, though, they do apply. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Callum. Yeah, that's right. So eligibility, yes.
Yeah, some of these he can't answer.
Yeah.
They're great questions, can I say?
Yeah.
I did check with John E about, there's a question here around, do we need to update a previous head agreement? We'll have to take that one on notice. Yeah, so I checked, so I didn't know that you could.
No.
So they can just, about this multiple Cert 2 funded clarifies only one per, can you do that?
Yeah, so there's a question around Cert 2. It's gone.
Here. Previously multiple Cert 2 funded.
Yeah, so under Skills for All, there used to be access to 2 Certificate 2 courses. When we changed policy, it reduced to 1 Certificate 2. However, if it does depend on the employment status of the individual, so if they are unemployed, then they can have access to more, but not, well, there was a deliberate move to just the 1 Certificate 2. Yeah.
And do we have anything that's classed as traditional trade?
What is classed as traditional trade?
Yeah, is that a sort of like what Chris said before? Like this is our traditional trades are all on the STL. Is that? I'm not sure who asked that. It might have been somebody from streaming in. So I think we're talking about traditional trades under a traineeship, a contract of training.
So it'd be your historical apprenticeship courses.
Yeah. All right, you're done with time. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We started today off talking about how we can find out more from you, and I really want to revisit the activity that we did first up. When you first sat down at tables, and those of you that are in the room virtually, that we asked you to sort of have a think about what you want to do and what you want to hear about. Reflecting, as we do, and it's good practice, about what's been presented today. I'm just wondering if you can take a few minutes, again, around the table would be great. Use Slido, or if you want to refer to your post-it notes, that's why I did say have a refer. Is there anything else? Are you still in the same place? Has it been of value? Would you change what it is that you originally set out to do? So please, this is really important, because we've attempted to do something today, and we really need the feedback around, are we on the mark or what else? Because as we move forwards with training provider forums, I'd like to think that they're organic and we can give you what it is that you want to hear. Your time is valuable and precious, so this is an opportunity to start to feed in what it is that you want to hear. So thank you for just taking a few minutes before we wrap up. Thank you. You can do that background music again if that's all right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of hands going. It's great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to speak in my loud voice now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're just going to try and, it's Friday afternoon, it's a long weekend, I get it, it's great. Thanks, Graham. Great conversation, thank you. On your tables, you would have seen some collateral about the framework. One side's got a lovely message from the Minister, but the things that Juliana and I spoke about earlier are literally on the other side. This is what we will be rolling out throughout the year, so I encourage you to stay informed and connected. I hope, well, I know that we have got a lot of light bulb ideas that we can take away from here, and I thank you for taking the time for your feedback. All of it will be looked at and evaluated, and it is very, very important to us. Comes to the time of the day where I can say thank you. I've said to you that your feedback's important. We will be emailing everybody that's registered and attended about this event, those sorts of things that we need to know if you're comfortable with it or another alternative. Responses to all of the questions that have gone up to Slido. And I did have a conversation with Stefan at a table over here. Slido, when you sign up to it, doesn't come directly to phones. It literally goes to another device. So if you ever want to use it in class or in your RTOs, it's a fantastic thing for polling and things like that. Free for everybody to use. So we have a computer, well, Emma's sitting here at the computer, and as questions are coming up, because she's archiving them all at the same time, so we're not editing them, we're just putting everything there. They will all be responded to and shared with everybody. So that's I can promise you that. I'd like to personally invite you to our next forum. If you liked it, come again, please. It's Friday the 31st of May. We've booked this suite at the Convention Centre for all of the forums. And depending on the content, depending on the feedback that we get, there's opportunities for breakout sessions. There's all sorts of things. Really happy to listen to what you want to have. I'd like to say thank you to everybody who contributed. The team that I work with, everybody across the department, Chris for listening to me every night, just about for the last 3 weeks, Madeline for guidance and support, the Minister, he's not here, but thanks for making the time. I think that really, really was important to sort of get that reinforcement. And thank you especially to you, the audience, for making the time to come and listen and continue the journey now throughout this year. And I really look forward to working with all of you. We'll be here for a little while too. It's goodbye for now. I think the last thing is always my contact details. Please, if you want something, need something, if you can think of something, there's always the opportunity to talk and engage. Really happy to do that. The slides, there was a few questions, the slides will be provided as well. So all of this will happen after Monday. Happy long weekend, South Australia. Thank you so much.